You were never the problem. You were the threat. Let that sit heavy on their hearts, because when someone's presence makes even the darkest forces flinch, you know they're not just ordinary. Now, imagine this for a moment. Chosen one. You're walking through life, quiet, focused, minding your own journey. Yet the tension in the room rises the moment you enter. People glance, fake smiles stretch. Some back away without knowing why. It's not paranoia, it's pressure. The pressure your presence brings. Like the universe placed a code inside you that even the shadows recognize and fear. You're not loud, but your energy screams, untouchable. Here's a mind-bending fact. According to behavioral science, people naturally react with fear or envy toward those who radiate authenticity, because it reminds them of everything they're suppressing. That's you. You didn't become the enemy by doing something wrong. You became the enemy by doing nothing wrong at all. You existed, you survived, and that alone shook the ground beneath their illusions. And thank you, chosen one. Don't forget to pay this message forward by simply pressing like and subscribing to help spread this light to more souls. It's the responsibility of all of us to keep this mission alive. You're not just listening. You're part of a force, part of a movement, and your presence matters more than you know. Thanks for standing tall. Now, let's dive deeper. Let's get this straight from the beginning. This isn't about being liked, loved, or celebrated. This is about being selected. You weren't just chosen to shine. You were chosen to expose. And when your light hit certain people, they didn't admire it. They panicked because it revealed too much. Your energy came with a mirror, a reflection they weren't ready to face. Most people think being chosen means constant blessings, open doors, and easy roads. But here's the uncomfortable truth. The universe doesn't give that kind of power without making you earn it in pain. You were set apart, isolated, misunderstood, not because you were weak, but because your calling was too loud to blend in. They didn't ignore you because you were nothing. They ignored you because you were everything they were pretending not to see. Your presence forced people to confront their own masks, and instead of growing, they resented you. So they talked, they laughed, they tried to tear you down behind closed doors, hoping you'd fall without an audience. But what they didn't know was that silence was your training ground. While they were mocking you, the universe was molding you. While they were busy gossiping, life was giving you armor. You were being shaped in shadows to be unstoppable in the light. And now, they're watching, regretting, whispering, because you didn't just survive, you evolved. You didn't just return, you rose. And not only did you come back stronger, but you also came back untouchable. They're in shock because they thought the attacks would define you, but you became the proof that pressure makes diamonds, and pressure also makes people fold. You were the one who stayed quiet while they shouted. You were the one who kept moving while they blocked your path. And now the same ones who tried to write you off are reading your story, secretly hoping they're not mentioned in the next chapter. That's what happens when the chosen one rises. Regret becomes the echo in the hearts of those who tried to dim your flame. And here's what most people won't tell you. Even the darkest energies sometimes leave you alone, not out of mercy, but out of fear of consequence. You've been through so much and came out with a force field around your spirit. You are so protected by purpose that even the negative forces have to step aside and whisper, "Not this one." That's what the title meant. You're so elevated, so anointed by design, that even the forces meant to destroy you ended up guarding you instead, not by choice, but by command. You became off limits, And now, those same people who tried to harm you are haunted by the fact that they couldn't. They're not just regretting what they did, they're regretting who you've become, because your strength became their reminder of everything they failed to break. So keep walking, chosen one. Keep shining. You don't owe them a response, a clapback, or an explanation. Your success is the answer. Your peace is the revenge. And your presence, that's the proof. So if your spirit's been nodding while listening, that's no coincidence. That's alignment. Drop a 777 in the comments if you feel the weight of being the one they couldn't destroy. The one whose presence now keeps them up at night. And if this message hits where words usually don't, consider fueling the mission. Whether it's a like, a share, or a small token of thanks, every bit helps push this truth further, louder, and deeper into the souls that need it most. Because chosen ones like you, you're rare, and rare things deserve to be reminded of their power. And now, let's break it down step by step. Trust me, if you're really the one, if this message truly matches your scars and survival, you won't just want to hear this. You'll feel pulled to stay till the very end. Let's get into it. Number 1. You were so protected, even darkness knew not to play with you. They didn't back off because they respected you. They backed off because touching you came with consequences they weren't built to survive. Let that burn deep in their ego. You see, when someone carries a frequency that disturbs even the silence, they're not ordinary. They're a problem, a walking disruption to everything fake, twisted, and low vibrational. That's you. You didn't have to swing, scream, or even speak. Your very presence knocked the mask off people who were pretending to be something they're not. You walked in, and they flinched, not because you were doing anything wrong, but because you existed on a level they couldn't manipulate. Now imagine this. You're not flashy, not loud, not chasing attention, just moving through life, trying to heal, trying to breathe. But behind the scenes, forces were being thrown, attacks were being planned, energies were being cast your way like darts. And still, you walked through it. The fire never swallowed you. The traps never caught you. Why? Because even the darkness had to pause before it touched you. That's not paranoia, that's pattern. Look back. How many times did it almost go left but didn't? How many people tried to play dirty only to end up sabotaging themselves? How many rumors collapsed before they could spread? That's not coincidence, that's cosmic interference. You were insulated by something the eye couldn't see, but every low-level spirit could feel. And that's why they hated you. You reminded them that there are some people you just don't mess with. Not because they're perfect, but because the consequences are too heavy. Here's a truth nobody talks about. When people can't beat you spiritually, they come for you socially, emotionally, silently. They plant seeds of doubt, confusion, and chaos. But no matter how deep they tried to bury you, they never realized you weren't a corpse, you were a seed. Every hit they threw, it watered your resilience. Every attack, it strengthened your spirit. They tried to break you and accidentally built you. And the enemy? Oh, he's strategic. He's not dumb. He doesn't waste effort on someone he can't crack. So he didn't come at you loud. He came at you through people. Friends turned fake. Family turned cold. Lovers turned jealous. It was never about the people. It was about what was in you that he wanted to dim. But every time he thought he had you cornered, the universe flipped the script. You lost people but gained clarity. You lost moments but gained depth. You were never losing. You were being leveled up in silence. See, you never had to tell the world who you were. Your survival screamed it loud enough. They saw the glow, they felt the pressure, and even though they pretended not to see it, their reactions gave it away. Why else would they suddenly shift, distance, gossip? Because your existence made their illusions uncomfortable. You didn't have to expose them, your light did. And that's why they tried to dim it, because your truth was too loud for their lies to survive in the same room. Here's what's wild. While you were blaming yourself for being too sensitive, too soft, too different, the very energy trying to break you was fully aware of your ranking. You didn't know your own power, but the enemy did. That's why he couldn't leave you alone. That's why he kept circling, because your silence had more authority than their noise. Your stillness was loud in spiritual spaces, and the enemy knew. This one's marked, not for destruction, but for domination. But here's the part they'll never say out loud. They regret it deeply. They regret pushing you, doubting you, playing you, because now they're watching you walk in a power they never thought you'd activate. They thought the rejection would wreck you. They thought the isolation would finish you. But it refined you. Now you're glowing in ways they can't explain. Now you're becoming everything they tried to convince you you'd never be. And the darkness? It doesn't try you like it used to, because it learned. It learned that when it comes to you, the price is too high. You're not just protected, you're guarded by purpose. You're not just walking, you're being carried by alignment. You're not just surviving, you're fulfilling something far beyond their comprehension. That's why the chaos around you always failed. That's why their schemes always fell short. Because messing with you came with a fine they weren't equipped to pay. You were never just lucky. The universe didn't favor you for fun. No, you were built different because you had to be. You carry weight most people would crumble under, and even when you didn't see the war, you felt it. The heaviness, the sudden sadness, the random spiritual pressure, that was evidence of your ranking. You weren't just walking through life. You were walking through spiritual battlefields, wearing peace like armor. So now what? Now you rise. You stop explaining, stop apologizing, stop playing small, because the very forces that once tried to take you out, they're watching from the sidelines now, confused, regretful, quiet, and the silence from your enemies is louder than any applause they could have given. They don't hate you because you failed. They hate you because you didn't. They're in regret because they touched what was untouchable, tried to bury what was bulletproof, and now they've got front row seats to your elevation. A show they tried to cancel but can't stop watching. You were so anointed, so divinely structured by the universe, that even the enemy had to step back and say, "This one's protected. We can't move recklessly here." And that's where you win. You didn't have to fight dirty. You didn't have to retaliate. You let the universe do what it always does for the chosen. Make sure no weapon formed ever prospers, even if it gets close enough to scare you. And that's your edge, that's your armor, that's your story. Let me know when you're ready for the next one. I'm locked in. Number 2. They didn't just fumble you, they mishandled a loaded weapon with the safety off. They didn't lose you, they violated the terms of your presence, and now they're paying the rent in regret. You weren't just the blessing, you were the break in their storm, and they spit in the rain. They didn't reject a person, they rejected divine timing wrapped in skin and humility. Some people only realize what they had when peace leaves with you and chaos moves in like a roommate. They thought they were dealing with someone average, just another soul with a pulse and a soft spot. They thought they could gaslight you, manipulate you, misuse your kindness, and walk away unbothered. They thought you were disposable until everything they touched after you started falling apart. See, they weren't just playing with a person, they were playing with alignment. Now imagine this, chosen one. You're the lighthouse during someone's storm, and instead of anchoring themselves, they throw rocks at the only thing keeping them from drowning. They didn't just reject you, they rejected the peace you carried, the clarity you brought, and the covering that came with your presence. And now, they're not just haunted by your absence, they're haunted by what left with you. You ever wonder why, after you left, their life went sideways? Why they look dimmer? Why the energy around them feels off? That's because when they let go of you, they let go of everything attached to you. Peace, favor, elevation. You weren't just a chapter in their life. You were the turning point they mishandled. And the universe doesn't play about moments like that. They thought you were just a kind person, just someone who cared too much. They didn't realize they were touching sacred ground without gloves, because you weren't sent to them for fun. You were sent to shift their entire direction. But they couldn't see it. Why? Because you didn't come with flashing lights or a title. You came in silence, humility, vulnerability. They expected fireworks, but all real miracles arrive in whispers. Imagine giving someone a key to a vault, and instead of using it, they throw it in the dirt. That's what they did with you. You were access to better decisions, to healing, to wholeness. And they thought they could find that energy somewhere else, that maybe they could upgrade. But what they found instead was a downgrade dressed in disguise, because nothing hits harder than realizing you had everything and you threw it away for nothing. That regret, it's not casual, it's suffocating. It's not just, I miss them. It's, I sabotaged the best thing I ever touched. They remember how things aligned when you were around, how opportunities opened, how peace stretched across their chaos. They remember the way they felt safe around you, even if they never told you. And now they wake up every day to the echo of what they lost and the silence of what never came back. You didn't leave a void, you left a vacuum. You didn't just walk out, you took your covering with you, and they've been feeling the cold ever since. That's what happens when people mishandle sacred energy. The universe doesn't just watch, it reacts, it corrects, it recalibrates. And the ones who misused what was pure always pay in echoes and missed blessings. Here's a brutal truth. They didn't see your value because you made love, loyalty, and peace look effortless. You gave without keeping score. You showed up when no one asked. You saw them clearer than they saw themselves. And instead of cherishing that, they exploited it. But now they realize that kind of energy doesn't come around twice. Imagine this. You hand someone a map out of a burning building and they laugh in your face, only to scream for help when they're trapped inside. That's how they're living now, trapped in consequences they created by mishandling the one person who came to save them from themselves. You weren't just someone they dated, or called friend, or labeled family. You were the divine pause between destruction, and they hit fast forward. And now you wonder, did they ever really care? The answer is yes, but not enough. Not enough to change, not enough to evolve, not enough to rise to the level your presence required. And now they regret it. Because it wasn't just that you were good to them, it's that no one else ever has been the same since. They keep trying to replicate what they had with you in hollow places, with hollow people, and the results keep shattering. Because the truth is, they didn't just lose a person, they lost divine alignment. You were a once-in-a-lifetime moment dressed in everyday clothes, and they missed it. So now they look for better, not realizing that they already had the best, but treated it like background noise. It haunts them. You might not hear from them, but trust this, they scroll in silence. They revisit old messages. They play your voice in their head during the quiet moments, because they know the one who brought light warmth, stability. They mishandled. And no matter what they chase now, it doesn't feel the same. It doesn't hit the soul. Because the one who did is gone. They're not just regretting losing you, they're regretting the ripple effect of mishandling you. The blessings that stopped, the favor that dried up, the opportunities that slipped through their fingers like sand. Everything was flowing when you were near, and now it's just static. So what's the lesson, chosen one? Stop questioning your worth. Stop dimming your light to make others comfortable. They didn't walk away because you lacked something. They walked away because they didn't know how to handle everything you came with. And when people mishandle power, the universe takes it back. Your presence wasn't a coincidence. It was divine strategy, and they fumbled it. Not because you weren't enough, but because they weren't ready. And now, they have to watch you rise, watch you heal, watch you evolve, alone. And that's the kind of regret that no apology can fix. Number 3. You were so dangerous to darkness, it chose to watch instead of war. Some threats are too loaded to touch, so they're studied, stalled, and surrounded, but never struck. They didn't attack you directly, not because you were safe, but because you were too powerful to gamble with. The enemy looked at you and saw something that didn't fit the usual pattern, something too risky to interfere with. You weren't just walking through life like everyone else. You were moving with a charge, a current, a ripple effect that bent atmospheres. So instead of launching a full-blown attack, the shadows decided to slow you down in silence. You were the kind of soul that couldn't be silenced, only distracted. And that's exactly what they tried. Not with chaos that would destroy you, but with subtle drains, fake love, flaky friends, almost opportunities. They weren't meant to break you. They were meant to delay you, because the real threat was what would happen if you ever figured out who you really are. Imagine this, a sleeping lion in a cage with the door wide open. The enemy hoped you'd never wake up, that you'd stay distracted, discouraged, or doubting. But now, you've opened your eyes. You've felt the shift. You've heard the inner voice that refuses to be quieted. And suddenly, hell's entire strategy is burning to ash. Here's what most people won't tell you. The enemy doesn't waste time on people going nowhere, but when someone is carrying generational fire in their bones, silence isn't protection, it's strategy. You weren't untouched because you were overlooked. You were watched, like a bomb they couldn't disarm, only monitor. That's why you've felt so off most of your life. Why connections always turned strange without warning. Why things almost worked out, then crumbled. Because you were a glitch in the system, and the system tried to rewrite you before you rewrote it. And let's clear something up. You didn't survive because you were lucky. You survived because your mission is too high value to cancel. The universe placed a protective perimeter around your soul, a limit line the enemy couldn't cross. That's why they tried everything around you. But your core, untouched, preserved, intact. Now that you're aware of this, nothing can hold you. The stall tactics have expired. You've been preserved for a purpose so big that even the shadows dared not interfere directly. And now that you know the truth, even they know it's over. Number 4. They buried you alive and forgot you were the seed. They didn't cancel your destiny, they just gave it more time to multiply. They thought silence meant defeat. They thought disappearing meant dead. They thought if they drained you, disrespected you, and dragged your name just low enough, you'd vanish. And for a moment, you almost did. But what they forgot is that you weren't built from surface strength. You were designed by pressure, not just to stand, but to rise through sabotage. Imagine this, a pressure cooker that never explodes. It just intensifies. That was you. Every time they turned the heat up, you didn't break. You refined. You recalibrated. While they were high-fiving their own betrayal, you were in the shadows, sharpening your edge in silence. They couldn't destroy you. They could only delay the version of you that was always coming, because real destiny doesn't die, it just detours. Your purpose was never in their hands. They thought it was personal, but what they were actually fighting was the future, a future that exposed their mediocrity, a truth that made their lies hard to live with. Let's be honest, the attacks got close. Your mental health took hits. Your circle thinned. You questioned everything. But even then, you didn't break. You bent. You cracked open. You got still. And in that stillness, something rare happened. You realigned with power they never saw coming. They thought they stopped you, but all they did was give you a better reason to rise. Now they're uncomfortable, not because you're loud, but because you're undeniable. You walk different. You speak with clarity. Your presence doesn't ask for permission anymore. It walks in like truth, unapologetic and unshakable. And the irony, they helped create it. Their hate built your stamina. Their betrayal refined your boundaries. Their attacks taught you how to elevate in silence. Now they're watching what they tried to kill become a threat they can't control. So the next time they see you and feel uneasy, let them. That discomfort, that's the price of mishandling someone who was never meant to be cancelled, only crowned. Number 5. You were the mirror they couldn't shatter, so they tried to smear it. They didn't hate you for what you had. They hated you for what you made them see. You didn't show up trying to prove anything. You weren't flexing. You weren't performing. You were just existing, honestly, humbly, and fully present in your own lane. But even in silence, you disrupted the room. Why? Because truth doesn't need a microphone, it just walks in and exposes whatever's fake. You weren't loud, but your peace was deafening to people drowning in inner chaos. Your calmness pierced their noise, and your authenticity, it lit up every mask they thought was still hidden. You became a silent alarm in their spirit, ringing not because you attacked them, but because your very presence revealed them. Imagine this, you walk into a room carrying no weapons, just light, and suddenly people flinch, not because you did something wrong, but because their shadows got caught standing still. You didn't make enemies by hurting anyone. You made enemies by existing with clarity in a world full of confusion. They couldn't compete with you, so they turned you into a silent rival. The compliments came laced with jealousy. The support was half-hearted. They celebrated you in public, then questioned your worth in private. But deep down, the truth stayed lodged in their chest. You were everything they pretended to be. You didn't talk loud, but your walk had power. You didn't claim to be better, but your peace made them feel exposed. They couldn't love you right, because loving you meant confronting themselves. And that was a war they weren't ready to fight. They didn't dislike your energy. They disliked what your energy revealed about theirs. Your consistency shook their excuses. Your discipline mocked their distractions. Your focus turned their fake confidence into dust. They didn't envy your stuff. They envied your stillness, your self-awareness, your growth. And the scariest part, you did it all without trying to compete. You were the mirror they kept trying to break, not realizing the cracks weren't in you, they were in them. Let me know when you're ready for the next one, Usama. This story is getting heavier and stronger with every word. Number 6. You were the door, but they chose the dungeon. Some people aren't scared of losing you. They're scared of what they'd have to face if they walked with you. You weren't just a moment in their life. You were a lifeline, an escape route wrapped in skin, a walking answer to questions they didn't have the courage to ask out loud. But when it came time to choose change over comfort, they turned back. Not because you weren't real, but because the version of themselves they'd have to become with you terrified them more than the pain they already knew. Imagine this. Someone drowning in a cage, the door wide open, and you standing there saying, "Come on, let's go." But they stare at the exit and say, "I don't deserve it." Or worse, "I'm safer here." That's what happened. You didn't just show up with love. You showed up with liberation. And not everyone wants to be free. You exposed the rusted chains they'd painted gold. You interrupted the cycle they'd romanticized. They weren't ready for a mirror that didn't flatter, but reflected. So instead of choosing breakthrough, they chose blame and labeled you the problem, not because you hurt them, but because your presence threatened their narrative. You weren't too much. You were just too real for someone still addicted to their illusions. They weren't rejecting you, they were rejecting what you represented. Growth, accountability, real healing. That's why they twisted your loyalty into control, your love into judgment, your truth into attack. You became a trigger, not because you were wrong, but because you made them feel seen. And they weren't ready for that kind of clarity. Now they sit in the same cycles, spinning in circles, haunted by the moment they slammed the door you offered. They didn't just lose a connection, they lost their way out. And deep down, they know it. They know they had someone who could have led them into a higher version of themselves, but they chose chains over change, pain over progress, the cell over the cure. And now, they're not mad at you. They're mad at what they missed, and the fact that you're never coming back to open that door again. Number 7. They tried to sink you and didn't realize they were standing on the same ship. When you sabotage the one sent to save you, don't be surprised when the storm doesn't pass. They thought they were pulling off something clever, throwing shade in silence, twisting your intentions, forming little alliances of bitterness and gossip. They thought they were hurting you, but in reality, they were cutting off their own lifeline, because you weren't just passing through, you were placed, positioned, assigned. You didn't show up to compete, you showed up to cover. You carried light into their darkness, but they mistook it for threat. They couldn't see past their ego, envy, or insecurity, and in trying to dim your flame, they blew out the only torch leading them out of their own mess. Imagine this. They're drowning, and instead of grabbing your hand, they try to pull you under too, not realizing you were the only one who knew how to swim through that kind of storm. You were the exit, the anchor, the covering. You saw their pain and didn't flinch. You felt their brokenness and still chose to show up. But instead of gratitude, they handed you betrayal. They didn't just turn on a friend, they turned on favor, because what they couldn't see is that your presence wasn't just emotional, it was spiritual. You were speaking life over them behind their back, while they were slandering your name. You were fighting for them in silence, while they were plotting in whispers. They didn't realize they were trying to bury the one person holding back their own collapse. And now, the consequences are loud. Doors that used to open now stay shut. Peace that used to cover them is gone. They're watching the same pain they wished on you circle back home. Not because you cursed them, but because they cursed themselves by cutting off their own blessing. They weren't fighting you, they were fighting their own redemption. And when you plot against your rescue, you don't just lose a person, you lose access. That's not something an apology can fix. That's a debt only accountability can pay. And for most of them, they're still running from the bill. Number 8. They laughed at your fall. Now they choke on the rise. They didn't just mock your pain, they turned it into entertainment. And now your glow has turned their laughter into locked jaws. When you were in survival mode, barely breathing, barely standing, they weren't lifting you. They were watching, mocking, feeding off your pain like it was fuel for their fragile egos. Every tear you cried became a meme in their group chats. Every struggle you fought in silence became a scene in the movie they played for their own amusement. You weren't just going through it, you were being targeted for sport. Imagine this, you're in a storm, drowning, grasping for breath, and instead of throwing you a rope, they sit in the stands with popcorn, hoping the waves finish the job. That's the level of cruelty you survived. The laughs, the whispers, the fake check-ins masking secret satisfaction. But the universe never goes blind. Every smirk, every passive jab, every shady comment was recorded, not by you, but by something much greater. And now, the tables haven't just turned, they've flipped so hard, the silence is louder than the noise ever was. You didn't just bounce back, you rose like a storm they never saw coming. You became everything they swore you'd never be, strong, successful, and untouchable. And now, their mouths don't move like they used to. Their silence is no longer dismissive. It's suffocating. They're not quiet because they don't care. They're quiet because they can't stand the sound of your name echoing above everything they thought you'd never reach. They're choking on their own guilt. The success they used to say was impossible. It showed up, dripped in grace, shining like payback. And every time they see you, they don't see a person. They see a reminder of how low they stooped, of how loud they laughed, of how wrong they were. And here's the twist. You're not even mad. You don't want revenge. Because you won, and they know it. Their punishment is the shame that follows them into every silent room where your name lives rent-free. Number 9. You were the test they laughed at. Now you're the lesson they can't escape. They thought they were playing you. They were actually being graded. And now your glow is the red mark they can't erase. You weren't just a person. You were a moment, an opportunity dressed in humility, a test in disguise. While they were out here scanning for miracles with titles and noise, the real one walked in quietly, wrapped in peace, authenticity, and presence. That was you. And they didn't recognize it because you didn't look like the blessing they imagined. But the universe doesn't test people when it's easy. It tests when it's inconvenient. You were the divine curveball, sent not to entertain or serve, but to reveal. How they handled you was never about you. It was about what was buried inside them. Imagine this, someone praying for elevation, and when the elevator arrives, they try to break it down out of jealousy. That's how blind they were. They didn't just fail the test, they mocked it, gossiped about it, tried to compete with it. And now, they're stuck on the same floor, watching the one they underestimated rise through levels they'll never reach. You weren't the problem, you were the measuring stick. And when they came up short, they blamed the ruler. They didn't just mishandle you, they exposed themselves. The lies, the pettiness, the resentment, it all leaked out. You were pure with them, and they tainted the space. You came to love, to support, to bring clarity. And they tried to sabotage it all, not realizing the one they thought they could replace was the exact energy they've been missing ever since. Now here's the twist of divine justice. Your elevation had to be public. Your glow couldn't be hidden, not for attention, but as evidence. You are the walking reminder of what happens when someone honors purpose. And they are the cautionary tale of what happens when someone fumbles it. They didn't just fail a relationship, they failed a divine alignment. And now, every step you take is a silent sermon they can't stop watching. Number 10. Your light unmasked their darkness, so they ran from the mirror, not you. They didn't walk away because you were dangerous. They walked away because truth can't sit in the same room with deception without shaking the walls. You didn't offend them with your words. You didn't expose them with your actions. All you did was exist, and that was enough to unravel everything fake they were using to keep it together. You came in quietly, respectfully. You weren't loud, you weren't trying to be seen, but your presence carried weight. The kind that doesn't ask for permission, it just makes liars feel honest and actors forget their lines. Imagine this, you're a calm breeze walking into a room full of smoke, and suddenly every illusion gets blown out of hiding. That was you. Your light didn't need to announce itself. It simply revealed. Not because you were trying to call anyone out, but because real energy can't help but shake what's not aligned. They didn't understand it, so they blamed you, told themselves you were arrogant, too intense, too different. But that was never the truth. The truth is, your peace threatened their chaos. Your healing made their wounds scream. Your authenticity was a flashlight on their emotional mess. And no one likes to be seen without makeup, especially when the mask has become part of their identity. They weren't fleeing from drama. They were fleeing from their own reflection in your energy. They called you toxic because they couldn't control how your energy made them feel. But what really happened is this. Their shadows couldn't breathe around your truth. You didn't hurt them. You convicted them. And for people not ready to grow, that kind of discomfort feels like attack. So they left, not because you were wrong, but because you were right, and being around you would have forced them to admit it. Let them go. They weren't escaping harm. They were escaping the healing they weren't ready for. But one thing is certain, they'll never forget how it felt to stand in your light and be seen for real. Number 11. They didn't just walk away from you. They walked out of the door they were praying for. Some people didn't lose a relationship. They lost the access code to their next chapter. They thought leaving you was just a flex, just another power move, like you were replaceable, like you were just another name in their contacts. But what they didn't understand, and still can't fully admit, is that walking away from you wasn't just a goodbye. It was a shutdown of flow, of favor, of alignment. Because you weren't just part of their life. You were the portal to what they were trying to reach. Imagine this. You're holding a master key, unlocking doors they've been praying to walk through, and they throw it away because they didn't like how humble the packaging looked. That's what they did. They confused familiarity with insignificance, and in doing so, they unplugged their own momentum. You carried peace, the kind that can't be bought. You brought clarity in chaos, strategy in confusion, protection they didn't even recognize, and instead of honoring that, they played with it, treated it like it would always be there. But energy like yours is rare. When it leaves, it takes doors with it. They didn't just mishandle you, they cancelled access to the version of themselves they were supposed to become. Now they're watching the very anointing they mocked become a miracle in someone else's life. Watching others who respected your presence rise, not out of luck, but because alignment honors alignment. It's not envy they're sitting in, it's realization. That ache in their chest isn't regret for losing you, it's regret for missing their moment. You weren't just someone in their life, you were a setup for their breakthrough, and now they're stuck in cycles they thought they'd escaped. Doors are closed, peace is gone, progress has paused, and everywhere they look, they're reminded the very elevation they sabotaged now wears your face. That's not punishment. That's the cost of dishonoring divine access. And it doesn't knock twice. Number 12. You never asked to be seen. Now your glow screams without permission. You weren't chasing validation, but now your rise is so loud, even their silence sounds like regret. You didn't post your pain. You didn't broadcast your struggle. You didn't throw tantrums when you were overlooked. You just kept moving, quiet, consistent, real. While they ignored you, doubted you, or even plotted against you, you stayed locked into your path, not for applause, but for alignment. And now, the same ones who dismissed you can't scroll, breathe, or move without being reminded. You made it. Imagine this. You're walking through fire, alone, with no one watching, only to come out shining so bright. The very people who counted you out need sunglasses just to look your way. That's what divine favor does. It doesn't show up with noise. It reveals itself in results. In doors opening where walls once stood. In peace replacing pain. In growth that can't be ignored. They thought their silence would slow you down, that distance would delete your value. But what they didn't know, you were never built on their validation. Your elevation was tied to obedience. While they were counting followers, you were counting steps. While they were clapping for each other's mediocrity, you were quietly being molded in the dark. And now they can't handle the light. You didn't break, you bloomed. And now your growth is exposing everything they hoped would die. You didn't retaliate. You didn't drag them. You didn't clap back. You let your glow do the talking. And now it's preaching a sermon they can't avoid. They're not mad at you. They're mad at what your existence says about them. That they underestimated someone carrying the very thing they were praying for. And now that it's too late, regret is the voice haunting their quiet. But you don't need revenge. You don't need an apology. You are the closure, the walking proof that purpose doesn't beg and favor doesn't need permission to shine. Let them sit in silence. You already won.